Very good morning, my dear students. Today let me see about constructors in the derived classes. So before that, I just recall about the constructor as well as the derived class. So constructor, it is used to initialize data member of the class. Constructor will be called implicitly or automatically when object is created for the class. This is what we discussed earlier for the constructor. And rules for the constructor, we should have the name of the class as well as the constructor name must be same. And the constructor should not have a return value. So this is what about we already discussed about the constructor. And the derived class in the sense we are creating new classes from the existing class. That is what meaning for the derived class or subclass or even child class. This is the concept comes under the concept of inheritance. Until we didn't have any constructors, especially in base class as well as in derived class, we don't have any sort of these issues. It will work fine normally. When we have some constructors, especially in base class as well as in derived class, then we should follow some sort of rules. Okay. So that is the meaning of this constructors in derived classes. For example, the derived class constructor implicitly or explicitly call constructor of its a superclass. Of its a superclass. If you didn't have any super method, Java will automatically call or insert that super method in the derived class. Super method in the sense using this super keyword we can call the base class. Okay. Super is a keyword to access member of the base class. Okay. So already we discussed when we discuss about inheritance concept. If the superclass has a parameterized constructor, then we must explicitly call the base class constructor using the keyword called super along with the parameters which are used in the base class constructor. It is what given in this key points. Okay. If you didn't have any, do not write super in the sense if you are not having any super keyword to invoke the base class constructor, then Java compiler itself automatically use the first statement of the derived class constructor. Then while coming for this order of execution, it is always invoke the super class constructor, then only it will invoke the derived class constructor. Okay. Then constructor overloading is also possible in derived classes. So it is clearly given in this diagram. Look here. So in this superclass constructor will be executed first, then only derived class constructor should be executed. Now let me go for an example program and we will understand the concept now. Look here. Here I am having one base class. The base class name is animal. And one derived class, the name is dog here. The base class have one default constructor. Default constructor in the sense constructor without argument or constructor with the zero argument. It is called as a default constructor. Okay, in the derived class, look here, we have two constructors. One is a default constructor without no argument and one parameterized constructor in which I used one argument of the type string here. Okay, so in the default constructor, I didn't invoke or I didn't call the superclass or base class constructor. I used here super, but I commented here. While coming for the second one, that is parameterized constructor, in the first statement itself I used super. It means we are explicitly call the default constructor of the base class here. Okay, now in the class test constructor, I am creating object for this derived class, that is dog d1 is equal to new dog, and another one is dog d2 is equal to new dog of parameters. Okay, so we are having two constructors. So one is using default constructor, I am creating object, and another one is using parameters constructor, I am creating object for this what in the derived classes. Whatever it is, now let me see the results. For both things, what happened? The base class constructor should be invoked first. The first default constructor, I am creating object using default constructor, of course the first object. Okay, in that I didn't call the base class constructor. Even though we didn't call this, it should be called automatically or implicitly. So by which we are getting the result animal class constructor. Look here, animal class constructor, then dog class constructor was printed. Similarly, coming for the second object, okay, there I called the base class constructor using the super keyword. So here the base class constructor called, by which we are getting the results animal class constructor. Similarly, derived class constructor should be invoked when creating the object D2. Dog class constructor with the parameters should be displayed here. Okay, so this is what about this here. Okay, now we can go for the second way. Another one example in which I am having this base class person, in which I am having what? Parameterized constructor only, not a default constructor. In the derived class, I am having parameterized constructor. Okay, as well as the default. A display student is another method here. So in the both classes, I am having one constructor. Both are only parameterized. When we have only parameterized constructor in a base class, then we must invoke in a derived class constructor. That is what I did here. Look here, in the derived class, I defined one constructor, parameterized constructor of 3 arguments, in which my first statement is super of id comma name. This means we are invoking the base class constructor, parameterized constructor. Okay, now coming for this, creating object for this derived class here, student s is equal to new student of, here I am passing 3 values. One is integer, another one is string, another one is what? Integer. So this should be passed in this parameterized constructor, and by which I am passing this id and name for this super class constructor. Now coming for the results or output here, look here, base class constructor should be called. So okay, invoked. That is person class constructor called, then second statement it is executed student class constructor. After that I am invoking in the program display student. Display student is a method I defined in this derived class, that is also invoked here. By passing these 3 values, what happened? We are getting the result for this id as well as name as well as a mark here. And by invoking this super class constructor, we are getting the results of person class constructor called. Similarly, derived class student class constructor called. So this is what shown in this output. Look here, first person class constructor, it means base class. Then second is derived class constructor will be invoked, by which this statement should be printed. Now if we didn't have this super keyword, or if you are not invoking the base class constructor in the derived class, when we are having only parameters constructor in the base class, at the time of compilation itself it will throw error. If the derived class constructor does not call the super, then compiler tries to insert super implicitly. But in this example we are having only parameterized constructor, it means there is no default constructor. So what happened? At the compilation itself it will throw away error. So this is what about this derived class constructors. Okay, I think you may understand this. Thank you.